This is Jalil Hoskins, a 26-year-old man now on trial for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Latrice Mays, a mother of 5. The case began in March 2013. Latrice Mays was reported missing after she failed to return home. She was last seen at her apartment on Burton Street SW in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Days later, police located her body in a dumpster outside a Wyoming apartment complex. Investigators began the search for Mays's killer, and soon enough, they had their eyes on Jalil, the last person known to be with her. In court, prosecutors claimed that Mays had been planning to speak with law enforcement about an assault involving him and the father of 2 of her children, and Hoskins allegedly saw that as a threat. They argued that Hoskins' response was premeditated and an attempt to cover up a crime. They claimed he deliberately killed Mays, then disposed of her body in a dumpster. But the courtroom heard a different version of events when the defense stood before the court. At first, Jalil denied any involvement in Mays's death.
I have nothing to do with the murder. I have nothing to do with the disappearance.
But then, he enters a plea of guilty to second-degree murder, maintaining that Mays's death was an accident.
Today, in the middle of his murder trial, Jalil Hoskins broke down, admitting he killed his girlfriend, Latrice Mays, and tossed her into a dumpster.
But the prosecution believed otherwise, and they had a string of witnesses to prove their case.
He told me after the domestic or whatever happened, I guess she, after they left, she said she was going to tell the police that he stabbed her baby daddy.
And he said, I did her, I need some help, I can't carry her by myself.
And so, despite the defense's claims that it was a tragic accident, the jury and the judge weren't convinced. Throughout the proceedings, Hoskins remained calm, but that calmness did not last. As Judge James Robert Redford delivered the sentence 50 to 100 years in prison, effectively life without parole, Hoskins snapped. And it didn't end there. As Hoskins was hauled out by officers, his family erupted too, shouting across the aisle at Mays's grieving relatives.
Unexpected development. You didn't expect him to actually admit to this, correct?
Correct. We didn't expect it at all. It surprised everybody, including the judge. And
Jalil Hoskins might have lost control when the judge read his sentence, but at least he waited for sentencing. For Ronnie ONeal, he turned the entire court trial into a stage, and he was the defendant, the lawyer, and the chaos.
If you think I'm here to play around with y'all, goddamn it, I'm not.
This is Ronnie ONeal, a man facing multiple charges, including the murders of his girlfriend and their 9-year-old disabled daughter. On March 18, 2018, emergency services were called to a horrifying scene in Riverview, Florida.
She made that call with fear in her voice.
Authorities claimed Ronnie ONeal fatally shot his girlfriend, Kenyatta Barron, then turned his rage on their 9-year-old disabled daughter, who he killed with a hatchet. ONeal also attacked his 8-year-old son, stabbing him repeatedly before setting the house ablaze. The boy, although badly injured and burned, managed to escape and later became a key witness in the courtroom.
The words that came out of this little boy's mouth were not a cry for help. They were not a help me or a painful cry. They will tell you the first words that came out of this little brave boy's mouth: my daddy killed my mommy.
Despite the overwhelming evidence and survivor testimony, Ronnie ONeal did not accept a plea deal. Instead, he made a decision that would define the entire courtroom experience. In court, ONeal stunned the courtroom by deciding to represent himself alongside his attorney, taking on the role of both defendant and co-defense attorney in a capital murder case.
The evidence is going to show my son did not see me murder his mom. The evidence is going to show he did not see me shoot his mom.
And he didn't hold back his opinions. He claimed he was framed. He denied parts of the prosecution's account.
And the evidence is going to show that law enforcement tampered with evidence.
Loud, ONeal delivered impassioned opening statements, and then he cross-examined witnesses himself, including the one person who survived his actions that night.
Did I hurt you that night of this incident?
yes.
I did. And how did I hurt you?
You stabbed me.
As the trial neared its end, O'Neal's courtroom behavior grew more aggressive and unhinged.
You will know the truth, whether in this trial or the next. Better believe it. And if you think I'm here to play around with y'all, God damn it, I'm not.
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
But O'Neal's strategy did little to sway the jury, and the verdict was clear.
But I'm going to look you in the eye and tell you, this is the worst case ever in my life, and I have seen some horrors, but this is it. And I'm going to mete out the punishment that I think this case deserves.
On July 23, 2021, the court sentenced him to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 90 years.
On count 1, Mr. O'Neal, I will adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to life in prison with a minimum mandatory of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Ronnie ONeal gave the courtroom a performance they would never ever forget. But what happens when the real disturbance wasn't only in the witness box or the defense table, but also in the gallery seats? Because when Shawnell Jackson was sentenced, it wasn't just him who snapped. This is Shawnell Jackson, a 19-year-old man, facing charges of armed robbery and first-degree murder in the state of Maryland. His victim, 24-year-old Nathan Potter, was gunned down during a robbery that turned deadly. The incident happened in 2009. According to investigators, Shawnell Jackson, then 18, along with an accomplice, confronted Nathan Potter in an attempted robbery. But when they discovered that Potter had no money on him, things escalated fatally. Prosecutors claimed that instead of fleeing the scene, Jackson pulled the trigger, shooting and killing Nathan in cold blood. Jackson also fled the state in an attempt to evade law enforcement, eventually crossing state lines into Mississippi. After a manhunt that spanned multiple states, he was arrested in Gulfport and extradited back to Maryland to face charges following a tip from his uncle to the police.
I believe I did the right thing, and there's nobody can make me change that.
In court, Jackson's mother pleaded for leniency.
When I saw it on the news, I even cried. I'm like, oh my God, I can't imagine what that mother is going through. I never had a clue that my child had anything to do with it. My son is not a monster. He is not a monster.
But Jackson himself showed little to no remorse. Multiple times during the trial, courtroom cameras caught him smirking, laughing, and even making gestures toward the grieving family of the victim. But justice was closing in as the prosecution had built a strong case, detailing not just the robbery, but Jackson's actions afterward, including fleeing across state lines to avoid arrest. He was convicted of first-degree murder and armed robbery, and then came the sentencing.
Mr. Jackson to life imprisonment without possibility for extended supervision. I know that is something that is reserved for the most serious of cases.
The judge handed down a life sentence without the possibility of parole, and that's when Shawnell Jackson snapped. But while the victim's family might have thought justice has been served, Shawnell's family clearly did not think so.
Courtroom.
Shawnell Jackson and his family might have been furious at his sentencing, but here is a defendant who tried to cry his way out of a murder conviction.
I didn't mean to kill Austin. Actually, I really didn't. I really think I did that. I didn't mean to hurt him.
And this is Dylan Shoemaker, a teenager from Springville, New York, in court facing charges of second-degree murder for the death of his girlfriend's 23-month-old son, Austin Smith. It was March 2013, when Dylan Shoemaker, then just 16 years old, was left to babysit little Austin while the child's mother went to work. According to prosecutors, Austin had started crying, and Shoemaker, overwhelmed and unable to calm the toddler, snapped. The toddler was beaten so severely that he suffered fatal head injuries. When rushed to the hospital, it was already too late. Austin Smith was pronounced dead from blunt force trauma. Dylan was arrested the next day and charged with second-degree murder. In court, the courtroom watched a visibly emotional teenager sobbing through his statement.
I can't take back what was done. And I wish I could. I would give my life for Austin. I loved him.
He even made a tearful plea to the victim's family seated right there in the courtroom.
I didn't mean to kill Austin. Ashley, I really didn't. I really think I did it. I didn't mean to hurt him.
His lawyer argued for leniency, emphasizing that that night was simply a mistake fueled by stress and inexperience.
But there were other dynamics at work there, including my client's inability to either control his anger or frustration and his inexperience in babysitting.
But then came the turning point. While awaiting trial in a holding center, Dylan made a phone call to his mother, and what he said in that private conversation told a different story entirely.
I am a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry in front of the jury, and they're going to feel sorry for me, end quote.
What had once been framed as a tearful accident now looked like cold manipulation. And with a sentence of 25 years to life in prison, the judge made it clear to Dylan that his tears in court were not enough.
The judgment of this court that upon your conviction for the crime of murder in the second degree, that you be sentenced to an indeterminate term of imprisonment which will have a maximum of life, the court hereby imposes a minimum sentence of 25 years.
While Dylan pleaded for mercy, this next defendant had no intentions of doing so, cursing his victims right there in the courtroom.
Clear there.
No, hey.
Go back to Tennessee too.
What did I tell you?
Go back to Tennessee too.
This is Jeremy Christian, a 37-year-old man who stood trial in the state of Oregon for the fatal stabbing of 2 men and the attempted murder of a third on a Portland Max light rail train. On May 26, 2017, Jeremy Christian boarded a commuter train in Portland, Oregon. Witnesses said Christian launched into a violent, hate-filled rant directed at 2 young black women, one of whom was wearing a hijab. 3 men, Taliesin Namkai Mecha, Ricky Best, and Micah Fletcher, tried to intervene and de-escalate the situation, but Christian got into an argument with them. And prosecutors say at some point he pulled out a knife and attacked them before walking off the train. Ricky Best, a 53-year-old Army veteran and father of 4, died at the scene. Taliesin Namkai Mecha, a 23-year-old recent college graduate, died later at the hospital. Only one of them survived, Micah Fletcher, who suffered serious injuries but lived to testify against Christian in court. In court, prosecutors laid out a detailed timeline of Christian's actions, showing a clear pattern of racist aggression and deadly intent. They even showed evidence that the day before the train stabbing, Christian had assaulted 2 black women, even throwing a bottle at one of them. And they had a line of witnesses to prove their case, including witnesses to the crime and the guy who survived the attack.
He was saying, fuck Muslims. Saying go back to Saudi Arabia. Basically just like telling us that because of our religion or because of our color that we don't deserve to be here and that we don't deserve to live.
But the defense had a different argument. The lawyer claimed that Jeremy acted out of self-defense.
Here's your question. One of your questions. Whether the state has proven at the end of the evidence to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, Mr. Christian's real-time belief was not reasonable, taking into account the circumstances that were present and Mr. Christian's self-preservation instinct.
But the jury were not convinced, and Christian was convicted of 2 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, assault, and other related charges. And when it came down to sentencing, things got more interesting, because one of the women who gave an impact statement right before the sentencing was Demetria Hester, whom Christian assaulted the day before the train stabbings, and she made sure to tell Christian what she thought of him.
And to Mr. Jeremy Christian, your mom should have swallowed you. You are a waste of breath, and when you die and go to hell, I hope you rot.
And that was when all hell broke loose.
Clear there.
No, hey.
Go back to Tennessee too.
What did I tell you?
Go back to Tennessee too.
You can.
We don't want you here. All your race hate
You ain't gonna be married. You ain't gonna be married. I should have killed you. Everybody knows you're alive.
Deputies quickly moved to regain control and put Christian out of the room. And the next time he was in court, Christian received 2 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. Jeremy Christian lashed out during sentencing, but he wasn't the only one who lost control in court.
Feel good about it? No, that won't throw me away.
This is Anthony Rodriguez, and the 18-year-old is facing multiple charges of kidnap, robbery, and sexual assault.
Jackie, this is the park where Anthony Rodriguez was found guilty of robbing, kidnapping, and also for sexually assaulting his victim.
The attack on the 25-year-old woman was brutal, but what made it even more horrific was that the victim had a hearing impairment, making it almost impossible for her to call for help.
One of the really more poignant moments during the trial was that she signed no. She was signing no to him when he was sexually assaulting her.
For weeks, police worked with limited leads until investigators were able to collect DNA evidence at the scene, and that DNA eventually led straight to Anthony Rodriguez, who was arrested on May 4th, 2012. Throughout the court proceedings, Rodriguez seemed largely unbothered, but when it was time to hear his sentence of 30 years to life, that mask finally slipped.
Feel good about it? No, that bitch feel good. That won't throw me away. That's all you do, throw me away like that.
Mr. Rodriguez, down now.
Anthony had to be physically restrained and escorted out of the courtroom by deputies when he wouldn't stop screaming at the judge. Outside the courtroom, emotions continued to boil as Anthony's mother, sobbing, told reporters that the conviction was unfair.
He don't deserve life. He don't. There's something. I believe there's something wrong that they should have gave him this. There's something wrong that, about things they didn't bring out in court.
While Anthony Rodriguez had to be physically restrained after his sentencing, Esteban Carpio entered the courtroom already restrained. And this time, it was his family who made sure the courtroom heard their outrage loud and clear.
Disfigured face.
This is Esteban Carpio, and he is in court facing charges of the murder of a police officer and the stabbing of 85-year-old Madeline Gatta. On April 17, 2005, Esteban Carpio was in custody, being questioned for the stabbing of 85-year-old Madeline Gatta. But things took a deadly turn inside the interrogation room. When one detective stepped out to grab water for the suspect, Carpio saw his chance. He lunged for the gun of Detective Sergeant James L. Allen, shot him twice, and killed him right there inside police headquarters.
And they tragically heard Detective Allen say, "I think he's going to kill me. He's got my gun, he's going to kill me." By the time they broke it down, the officer was dying, and Carpio had jumped out the window.
The search for the cop killer took hours with every police officer on the lookout for the fleeing suspect. When Esteban was finally caught, he looked like he had gone through hell with his face battered, bruised, and swollen. At his arraignment, he wore a full-face mask, leaving only his eyes exposed. The victim's family shouted accusations of police brutality, claiming that the facial injuries weren't from the fall, but from a vicious beating. But Providence police, however, told a different story. They said the injuries came from jumping out of the window and a physical struggle that followed his arrest. Rhode Island State Police Detective Christopher Zarella admitted in court that he punched Carpio in the face multiple times during the takedown. But the court agreed with him that force was necessary to subdue a man who had just murdered a police officer. On June 27, 2006, a jury found Esteban Carpio guilty of the murder of Detective Allen and the stabbing of Madeline Gatta. His plea of insanity was rejected, and the court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But while Carpio could not react to the entire proceedings due to the mask keeping his mouth in place, his family had a lot to say.
In the courtroom, his family is shocked to see his disfigured face.
Step off, step off. Not guilty! I'm not guilty! I'm not guilty, Steven!
Still, the law had its say, and Esteban was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for his crimes.